Have you ever wondered why some truths about human nature are rarely spoken about, especially when it comes to women? Most people are too afraid to question the comfortable stories society tells, but philosophers like Arthur Schopenhauer were not afraid to confront the uncomfortable. Let me ask you, do you think society hides certain truths because they're inconvenient or because they're simply hard to accept? Share your thoughts in the comments, because this question shapes the very discussion we're having today. Schopenhauer, one of the most influential yet controversial philosophers of the 19th century, believed that women's nature was fundamentally different from men's, not just physically but emotionally and intellectually. Whether you agree with him or not, his writings force us to reflect on issues of desire, relationships, and power. They challenge us to think more deeply about the roles we play in each other's lives. In this video, we're going to break down Schopenhauer's dark and often provocative views on women, why he believed so few men understood these truths, and how his philosophy can still spark important conversations today. And if this message resonates with you, make sure to comment seductive wisdom so I know you stayed with me until the end. Arthur Schopenhauer was a 19th century German philosopher known for his bleak but powerful outlook on life. He believed the world was driven by an irrational force he called the will, a restless energy that fuels human desires, struggles, and suffering. While many philosophers of his time painted optimistic pictures of progress and reason, Schopenhauer went the opposite way, exposing what he saw as the darker truths of human nature. His ideas about women are among the most shocking parts of his legacy. In his essay on women, Schopenhauer argued that women were fundamentally different from men, not only in physical strength but in intellectual and moral character. He described women as being more tied to survival, reproduction, and practical concerns than to higher pursuits like art, philosophy, or science. These views, even in his own time, sparked heated criticism. What makes his words still controversial today is that he didn't just make polite observations. He wrote in a brutally direct and unapologetic style. For example, while others praised the virtues of women, Schopenhauer insisted that men often deceived themselves with romantic illusions, refusing to see the biological and practical nature of female behavior. His sharp tone ensured that his philosophy would not be forgotten. It's important to note that Schopenhauer wasn't simply trying to insult women. His broader philosophy was pessimistic about all human beings, men included. He believed everyone was trapped in endless cycles of desire and dissatisfaction. His writings about women were a way of highlighting what he saw as one aspect of that endless struggle, the dynamic between the sexes fueled by survival and the continuation of life itself. Even though his essay on women is now nearly 2 centuries old, people still react strongly to it. Some dismiss it as pure misogyny, while others see it as a brutally honest perspective that exposes uncomfortable truths about attraction, relationships, and human nature. Regardless of which side you fall on, Schopenhauer's willingness to challenge polite conventions keeps his work alive in debates today. So let me ask you, do you think philosophers should always tell the truth as they see it, even if it offends, or should they soften their words to fit social expectations? Share your opinion in the comments. It's a question as relevant now as it was in Schopenhauer's time. To understand Schopenhauer's views on women, we first need to understand his central idea, the will. For him, the will was the driving force behind everything in existence, an endless, blind energy pushing us to survive, reproduce, and strive, often against our own happiness. Unlike reason or intellect, which he saw as secondary, the will was primal and unstoppable. Desire, according to Schopenhauer, is the clearest expression of the will. People constantly chase after what they don't have: money, status, relationships, only to find that satisfaction never lasts. The moment one desire is fulfilled, another takes its place. In his eyes, this endless cycle of craving and disappointment was the root of human suffering. When it came to men and women, Schopenhauer saw this struggle through the lens of reproduction. He argued that much of human attraction and behavior is not about romance or personal fulfillment, but about the will pushing us toward the survival of the species. For example, what we think of as love, he described as nature's trick to keep us reproducing, even when it leads to misery. This perspective explains why he believed women and men approach life differently. In his view, women embodied the practical side of the will, focused on survival, nurturing, and securing resources for children, while men often pursued abstract goals like art, science, or philosophy. He didn't see this as a balance, but rather as evidence of how deeply human behavior is controlled by unseen forces. Modern psychology has actually found echoes of this idea. Evolutionary biology, for example, suggests that many human behaviors around attraction and partnership are rooted in survival and reproduction. While Schopenhauer's conclusions were often harsh and one-sided, his intuition that desire is deeply tied to biology has influenced thinkers well beyond his time. So the question becomes, if our desires are really just the will, pushing us in directions we don't control, how much freedom do we truly have in love, ambition, or relationships? Share your thoughts in the comments, because this question strikes at the heart of Schopenhauer's dark view of life. Schopenhauer's essay on women is one of the most controversial parts of his work. In it, he described women in ways that were considered offensive even in the 19th century. He argued that women were more concerned with survival and practical matters than with abstract thinking, philosophy, or higher art. To him, women embodied the side of human nature most closely tied to the will, the instinct to protect life and ensure reproduction. One of his boldest claims was that women were less rational and more emotional than men. He wrote that their minds were not suited for great intellectual achievements but for immediate concerns of daily living. For example, he suggested women focused on securing stability, managing households, and raising children, while men were free to chase after broader ambitions. Whether right or wrong, his tone was blunt and dismissive, which guaranteed backlash. He also criticized what he saw as men's illusions about women. According to Schopenhauer, men often projected idealized qualities, purity, sweetness, or angelic nature onto women, when in reality they were simply human beings, driven by their own survival instincts. He believed this illusion blinded men in love, leading them into relationships and marriages that caused more suffering than joy. To illustrate his point, he often tied women's choices back to biology. For instance, he argued that women were naturally inclined to choose partners who could provide resources and protection, because reproduction and child-rearing demanded it. What many saw as love, he dismissed as nature's strategy disguised under emotion. These claims fueled heated debates. Supporters thought he was unmasking uncomfortable truths that others were too polite to admit, while critics saw him as deeply misogynistic. His uncompromising style left little room for nuance, which is why his essay continues to shock readers today. So here's the question for you. Do you think Schopenhauer was simply exposing biological realities in a brutal way? Or was he unfairly reducing women to survival instincts alone? Share your perspective in the comments, because this debate is exactly what makes his ideas so powerful and unsettling even now. From the moment Schopenhauer published his essay on women, he was met with sharp criticism. Many of his contemporaries accused him of outright misogyny, saying his views reduced women to little more than survival-driven beings. Even today, feminist scholars and philosophers often cite him as an example of how philosophy can be distorted by personal bias. His sweeping generalizations left little room for exceptions, making his claims easy to challenge. Some argue that his bitterness toward women was deeply personal. Schopenhauer had a strained relationship with his mother, who was herself a writer and intellectual. Their frequent conflicts may have shaped his negative views of women's intellectual abilities. Critics suggest that instead of objective philosophy, his essay often reads like a venting of personal frustrations dressed in academic language. Others, however, see his harsh words as part of a bigger pattern in his philosophy. Remember, Schopenhauer wasn't just critical of women. He was pessimistic about humanity as a whole. He wrote that life was filled with endless suffering, that human desire was a trap, and that most people, men and women alike, lived in delusion. From this perspective, his views on women weren't unique hatred, but an extension of his broader distrust of human nature. Modern thinkers also point out that while his conclusions were extreme, some of his observations weren't entirely baseless. For example, his claim that attraction is rooted in biology and survival echoes modern evolutionary psychology. The controversy lies not in the idea itself, but in how harshly he expressed it. Without empathy or balance, this duality explains why Schopenhauer remains both hated and respected. On one hand, he voiced ideas that continue to offend. On the other, he pushed philosophy to confront uncomfortable questions about love, desire, and the illusions we create in relationships. His work forces readers to decide, was he a bitter cynic blinded by personal issues or a fearless truth-teller exposing realities others avoided? So what do you think? Should Schopenhauer's essay on women be dismissed as outdated prejudice or studied as a brutally honest, if flawed, reflection of human nature? Share your view in the comments, because the answer to that question reveals how much value we still find in his controversial philosophy. Even if we disagree with Schopenhauer's harsh conclusions, his work challenges us to think more critically about relationships, desire, and the illusions people often build around love. At the very least, his writings remind us that attraction is not always guided by reason or lofty ideals. It is often driven by deeper forces of biology, survival, and instinct. Ignoring that reality can leave us blind to the true dynamics at play. One lesson we can draw is the importance of seeing people as they truly are, rather than how we wish them to be. Schopenhauer argued that men frequently romanticize women, projecting qualities onto them that don't exist. This illusion often leads to disappointment. While his expression was extreme, the core warning is useful. Idealizing anyone sets us up for failure when reality eventually breaks through. Another takeaway is the value of questioning the social stories we inherit. Schopenhauer lived in a time when women were often praised in poetry and literature as angelic or flawless beings. By going against that narrative, he forced readers to ask, are these stories accurate, or are they cultural fantasies? In the same way, modern people can benefit from questioning the images of love, beauty, and gender roles promoted in media today. We can also learn from the balance he lacked. His words often failed to recognize women's intellectual and emotional strengths, but this gap teaches us something too. By examining where his philosophy fell short, we sharpen our own ability to think critically and avoid one-sided conclusions. His mistakes become opportunities for our growth. Finally, Schopenhauer's observations can remind us of humility. If so much of our behavior is influenced by biology and instinct, then perhaps we are not as rational or in control as we like to believe. Acknowledging these limits doesn't diminish us. It makes us wiser in navigating relationships and life itself. So here's a question for you. Do you think there is value in studying even the most uncomfortable or wrong ideas just to learn from their flaws? Share your perspective in the comments, because engaging with difficult truths often teaches us more than avoiding them. Schopenhauer wrote in the 1800s, but many of his warnings still echo in today's world. Modern relationships are filled with the same struggles he described: illusions, unrealistic expectations, and the tension between desire and reality. Even though his tone was harsh, some of his insights can be applied to help us see relationships more clearly in the present. One way his ideas apply is in the realm of attraction. Schopenhauer argued that what we often call love is really nature's strategy for reproduction. Today, psychologists and evolutionary biologists point out similar patterns. People are drawn to traits that signal health, stability, or resources. Recognizing this doesn't mean we reduce love to biology. It just helps us understand that deeper instincts are at play beneath our feelings. Another application is in avoiding illusions. Many people enter relationships blinded by idealized images, believing their partner will complete them or live up to a fantasy. Schopenhauer warned that such illusions eventually lead to disappointment. In modern terms, this means entering relationships with honesty and realistic expectations, not with Hollywood-style dreams that collapse under the weight of reality. His writings also remind us of the power dynamics that often exist between men and women. While his conclusions were extreme, he drew attention to how survival and practical concerns influence behavior. In today's world, being aware of financial stress, social roles, and family expectations can help couples build stronger, more balanced partnerships, instead of pretending these pressures don't exist. Lastly, his philosophy pushes us towards self-awareness. If desire and the will are always pushing us, then learning to question our own motives becomes essential. Are we seeking love for genuine companionship, or to fill a void? Are we projecting ideals onto a partner instead of seeing them clearly? These questions, inspired by Schopenhauer, remain relevant for anyone trying to build healthy, lasting relationships today. So here's the challenge. How do you think we can use Schopenhauer's dark but honest insights, not to dismiss women or men, but to create more realistic and stronger connections in our lives? Share your thoughts in the comments, because applying philosophy to modern love is a conversation worth having. Schopenhauer's words about women remain some of the most controversial in philosophy. Whether you see them as unfair attacks or uncomfortable truths, one thing is certain: they force us to think deeply about human nature, relationships, and the illusions we often create around love. His philosophy isn't easy to digest, but sometimes the hardest ideas are the ones that leave the deepest mark. What matters for us today is not whether we blindly accept or reject his claims, but how we use them to sharpen our own understanding. By questioning illusions, recognizing the role of biology and desire, and avoiding unrealistic expectations, we can build more balanced relationships. Even in his pessimism, Schopenhauer challenges us to look beyond appearances and face reality with open eyes. Now I want to hear from you. Do you think Schopenhauer's critique of women reveals timeless truths? Or was it simply the bitterness of one man? Share your answer in the comments, and if you stayed with me until the end, write seductive wisdom so I know you're part of this journey. Remember, philosophy isn't about comfort, it's about clarity, and sometimes clarity comes from the darkest places.